The first person to tell me about my sister's wedding loan was the mortgage officer trying to approve me for a townhouse. Rachel Monroe had smiled when I sat down across from her. I had brought 3 years of tax returns, current pay stubs, bank statements, and a spreadsheet of every account I owed. I had spent 20 years building a credit score above 800, and I expected the meeting to be boring in the best possible way. Instead, Rachel's smile disappeared as she turned her monitor toward herself. "Leah, did you co-sign your sister's wedding loan?" I stared at her. There was no wedding loan, not with my name on it. She asked me to verify my social security number, then my current address. Both were correct on the report, but an $82,000 unsecured installment loan had been opened 4 months before Ava's wedding. I was listed as a joint borrower. The account showed 2 late payments, a hard inquiry I did not recognize, and my father's address as the mailing address. The original balance matched the shortage in Ava's wedding budget almost exactly. Rachel spoke carefully. "I'm not saying you applied for it. I'm saying the lender reported it under your identity. Until this is resolved, your debt-to-income ratio is too high for the pre-approval we discussed." The townhouse I wanted was not extravagant. It had 2 bedrooms, a narrow back patio, and a kitchen window over the sink. After my divorce, I had spent 4 years saving for a place where every payment, every key, and every decision would be mine. My father had told me I deserved nothing. I had not known that meant I would be paying for everything. I asked Rachel not to submit an explanation on my behalf. I did not yet know what I could truthfully explain. She printed the account details, marked the lender name, and gave me the number for the fraud department. In the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel with the report on my lap. I wanted to call my father and ask one question loud enough to erase the last year. Instead, I photographed every page, emailed the copies to myself, and drove home to find out how my name had entered a debt I had refused before it existed. 10 months earlier, my father had announced Ava's wedding budget over dinner, as if he were revealing a scholarship or a charitable gift. We were seated at a private room in an Italian restaurant near his house. Ava held Noah's hand beneath the table. Martin had ordered champagne before anyone arrived, and the place cards were printed in gold. "150,000 is the ceiling," he said. "Not the goal, the ceiling." Noah nearly choked on his water. Ava laughed because she thought my father was being charming. I asked the only question no one else wanted to ask. "Are you paying from savings, or are you borrowing?" Martin set down his glass. "Can you let your sister have one happy night without turning it into an audit? I'm not auditing anyone. You still owe me money from the roof repair and the insurance deductible. I'm asking whether this is affordable." Ava looked wounded before I finished speaking. Martin noticed and leaned toward her. "This is why Ava deserves a real celebration," he said. "She knows how to appreciate family." Then he looked at me. "You've always thought you were better than us. You deserve nothing." The room went silent. Noah studied the tablecloth. Ava whispered, "Dad," but not as a correction. It sounded like an invitation to soften the wording. I had learned that defending myself in front of Martin only gave him more material. I placed my napkin beside my plate. "I'll give Ava $5,000 as a wedding gift," I said. "I will not co-sign a loan, guarantee vendor balances, use my retirement account, or open credit for this wedding." Martin laughed. "I didn't ask you to. I'm making it clear before anyone does." Ava followed me into the hallway and said I was humiliating her. I told her the gift would be transferred the next morning and that she could use it for anything she wanted. I also told her it was the full amount. The next day, I sent $5,000 directly to her account. In the transfer note, I wrote, "Wedding gift. No repayment expected." Then I sent a family text so no one could later pretend my boundary had been vague. "I love you, Ava. The $5,000 is my gift. I am not co-signing, guaranteeing, or borrowing for the wedding." Noah replied with a thank you. Ava sent 3 heart emojis. Martin did not answer for 6 hours. Then he texted me privately. "Do you still have the financial documents from the rental refinance?" The lender misplaced part of the file. 18 months earlier, I had helped him refinance a small rental property. I had sent him a password-protected folder containing a copy of my driver's license, an old tax return, a bank statement, employment information, and a form that included my social security number. I was not a borrower. Martin had needed help proving where a short-term family transfer came from, and I had provided documentation. I replied that I no longer had the complete folder and asked why he needed my documents. He said he had solved it. I believed him because I thought my father might ask me for money, pressure me to fix his accounts, or blame me for saying no. I did not believe he would build a second version of me and send her to a lender. Back in my apartment, I pulled full credit reports from all 3 national bureaus. The loan appeared on 2. On both, Martin's home was listed as an alternate address. The same unfamiliar hard inquiry appeared near the opening date. One report also showed a second inquiry from a furniture financing company. I placed freezes on my credit files. I changed the passwords for my email, bank, payroll portal, and retirement account. I removed an old shared family email from my recovery options and replaced security questions based on birthdays and childhood streets Martin knew better than I did. Then I called Erin Walsh, a consumer attorney recommended by a colleague at the community college. Erin listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked whether I had spoken to Martin since discovering the account. No. Good. Right now, you know information was furnished under your identity. You do not yet know who completed the application, what authentication was used, or whether the lender made an error. Preserve first, accuse later. She told me to save all 3 reports, the mortgage paperwork, my refusal texts, the $5,000 transfer, and every alert connected to the unfamiliar inquiries. She also told me to make a dated list of every place Martin might have obtained my information. I had barely finished the list when I called the lender's fraud department. The representative asked me to verify my identity, then placed me on hold. When she returned, her tone had changed. Our system shows you as a verified joint borrower. I did not apply. She read the contact information attached to the account. My social security number was correct. My employer was correct. The salary was close, but outdated. Martin's home was listed as my mailing address. The email looked like mine, except for one extra middle initial. The phone number was prepaid. There was a typed electronic signature under my name. I asked where the funds had gone. I can open an investigation, but I can't release the complete file through customer service. The primary borrower will be notified that the account is disputed. Who is the primary borrower? Martin Morgan. I closed my eyes. 20 minutes later, my father called. I let it ring, then listened to the voicemail. Leah, there's some confusion with the wedding financing. Do not start calling people and making this ugly. Call me before you damage Ava's marriage. He knew the lender. He knew the account. He knew the investigation had begun. I texted one sentence. Did you list me as a joint borrower? His answer came immediately. You agreed to help Ava. Don't rewrite history because you're jealous. I wrote back that all future communication about the loan needed to be in writing. Then he sent the message that ended any possibility of an innocent reporting error. Do not file a fraud claim until we talk as a family. Erin met me the next morning with a yellow legal pad and a calm expression. We opened the refinance emails from 18 months earlier. The old packet contained nearly every true detail used in the wedding application. My driver's license image, social security number, employer address, tax return, bank statement, and a scanned signature from a document checklist. The wedding application used the exact income from that old tax return, even though I had received a raise since then. That establishes access, Erin said, not use. She placed the old documents in one column and the lender's summary in another. The electronic signature on the new application included my typed name and what looked like a cropped image of my signature. The approval trail showed that verification messages went to the Alias email and prepaid phone, not to any account I controlled. Martin had not needed to hack my bank. He had not needed to break into my employer's system. He had needed enough accurate information to make a false version of me look ordinary. I remembered asking him whether he had deleted the refinance folder. Of course, he had said. I'm not an idiot. Aaron circled the Alias email. Nothing in my legitimate accounts, prior reports, or saved contacts connected me to it. That is useful, she said. It establishes that the lender communicated through a channel you did not ordinarily use. It still does not tell us who was sitting at the keyboard. I wanted certainty faster than the records could provide it. So a copied signature means nothing? It means something was submitted. The question is whether you controlled the contact channels, received the disclosures, and authorized the transaction. Electronic does not mean automatically valid, and suspicious does not mean automatically proven. She helped me prepare disputes for the credit reporting companies and the lender. I filed an identity theft report and documented the date of every freeze alert and phone call. Aaron also sent the lender a written request for the application and transaction records, supported by proof of my identity and the identity theft report. By lunchtime, the lender had assigned Dana Kim to the fraud review. Dana's first question was not whether I hated my father. It was whether I had ever lived at his current address. Not since I was 23. Have you ever used the email attached to the application? No. The phone? No. Did you receive loan disclosures? No. Did you authorize Martin to complete an application for you? No. Dana explained what she would review: the application, identity documents, authentication history, communications, device and network records available to the lender, the disbursement account, and the servicing history. She warned me that opening an investigation did not itself remove the account. I understand, I said, although I hated understanding. I had spent most of my career correcting payroll records. I knew that a system could be wrong and still look official until every source feeding it was corrected. Dana asked whether I had ever sent Martin proof of income. I told her about the refinance packet. That may explain why the file passed an initial document review, she said. It does not establish your consent. Before the call ended, she mentioned that a video verification attempt had failed. The application had then been completed using an alternative document process. The true documents had not been enough to prove I was present. They had been enough to help someone continue without me. Dana sent Aaron a preliminary application summary before the complete file was released. It established the structure early enough for us to know what we were dealing with. Martin was the primary borrower, and I was listed as joint borrower. My correct social security number and employer were used, while Martin's address replaced mine. An Alias email and prepaid phone received the notices. The proceeds were directed to Martin's checking account. The summary did not tell us who entered the information or operated the accounts. It did tell us this was not a simple case of my name being attached to the wrong person's credit file. Someone had submitted a coherent borrowing profile built around my real identity. Aaron drew a line down the center of a legal pad. On the left, she wrote authorized. On the right, she wrote disputed. The $5,000 transfer went on the left. So did the afternoon I spent helping Ava compare venue contracts. So did the call where I persuaded a photographer to remove an unnecessary overtime charge. The loan went on the right. The joint borrower status went on the right. The Alias email, prepaid phone, and electronic consent went on the right. You cannot strengthen your position by pretending you had no financial involvement with the wedding, Aaron said. You strengthen it by defining exactly what you did agree to. That distinction mattered because Martin had already begun collecting harmless moments and arranging them into a false story of consent. 6 weeks before the wedding, Ava had called me from the venue in tears. The caterer had raised the final guest count. The florist wanted a larger deposit, and Martin was not answering his phone. I drove over after work because Ava said the event might be canceled. I did not offer more money. I sat with the venue coordinator, reviewed the contract, and found that part of the increase came from an optional late-night food station Ava had added after the original proposal. Ava removed it. The balance dropped by several $1,000s. Martin arrived as we were leaving. He hugged Ava, thanked me for saving the day, and told the coordinator that I was the practical one in the family. Later, he would describe that meeting as evidence that I had joined the financing plan. I had joined a conversation. I had not joined a debt. On the wedding day, I carried an emergency sewing kit, copies of the vendor schedule, and the phone numbers for the transportation company. When a driver went to the wrong hotel, I fixed it. When Martin misplaced the envelope containing gratuities, I found it beneath a stack of place cards. The photographs showed me smiling beside Ava, adjusting her veil, and standing at the edge of the dance floor, while Martin gave a speech about giving his youngest daughter everything she deserved. None of those photographs showed a loan application. For years, my family had treated labor, money, access, and consent as versions of the same thing. If I helped with one, Martin assumed he could claim the others. Aaron made me describe each act in plain language. I gave $5,000. I reviewed one venue contract. I solved 2 wedding day problems. I did not agree to borrow $82,000. The exercise felt almost childish until I realized how often Martin's power depended on blurring verbs. Help became guarantee. Review became approve. Family became access. We attached the consent chart to our evidence index, not as legal proof by itself, but as a discipline for every conversation that followed. If Martin claimed I had agreed, we would ask, agreed to what, on what date, through which channel, and with what document? The mailing address was the first lie that made the rest possible. Martin had listed his house as mine. The lender saw a familiar name, a stable employer, and an address connected to the primary borrower. The Alias email carried my name. The prepaid number carried no history that contradicted the application. The income document was genuine, only old. Truth surrounded the false consent so tightly that the file looked complete from a distance. Aaron asked the lender to preserve the application session logs and any identity risk results already generated during underwriting. She warned me not to treat a network address or device fingerprint as a human fingerprint. A device could be shared. A home connection could be used by more than one person. The records would support a timeline, not identify a person by themselves. The lender's screening data classified the phone as prepaid and newly associated with the application. The Alias email had little prior history in the lender's risk system, and no known connection to my established contact information. Neither fact was enough alone. Together, they made Martin's claim of an accidental reporting error harder to maintain. That evening, Ava sent me a message. Dad said you knew about the loan. I called her because I wanted to hear whether she sounded surprised. She sounded defensive. He told me you finally decided to help, she said. He said you didn't want anyone making a big deal about it. I sent you $5,000. I told all 3 of you I would not co-sign. He said you 2 fixed it privately. Did you ask me? Ava did not answer. I asked what she knew before the wedding. She knew Martin was borrowing. She knew my name had become connected to the financing. She knew I had refused at the engagement dinner. She also knew the budget kept growing after Martin said the money was handled. I thought he apologized, she said. I thought you wanted to do something generous. I did. The $5,000 was generous. The rest was not mine to authorize, because I never authorized it. Ava started crying. For most of our lives, her tears had ended conversations. Martin would enter, identify the nearest person who had upset her, and turn Ava's distress into a verdict. This time, I let the silence remain. She said, part of the loan paid Dad back for other family expenses. He said it was all connected. That was the first time I understood the wedding might not be the whole debt. I told her I would not discuss repayment until I saw the lender's disbursement records. You're making this sound criminal, she said. I'm making it sound documented. 3 weeks after I discovered the account, the lender produced the application and transaction records in response to Aaron's written identity theft request. It was 73 pages long. Martin was the primary borrower. I was the joint borrower. My social security number, employer, old salary, and driver's license image appeared throughout the file. The false email was used to acknowledge disclosures. The prepaid phone received verification codes. My typed name appeared beneath promises to repay. A cropped image of my signature appeared on a consent page. The funds were directed to a checking account controlled by Martin. There was no email to my real address, no call to my real phone, no login from any device the lender could connect to my established customer history. The file was convincing because every false action was attached to a true fact. Martin had not invented Leah Morgan. He had edited me. The first transfer from the funded loan went to Ava's venue. The second went to one of Martin's credit card accounts. Aaron brought in Samuel Ortega, a forensic accountant who spoke about family money with the emotional warmth of a refrigerator. It was exactly what I needed. Samuel traced the $82,000 from Martin's account. $28,000 went to the venue and catering company. $9,000 covered floral and photography upgrades. $6,000 funded part of the honeymoon deposit. $5,000 went toward Ava and Noah's condominium reservation. The rest did not belong to the wedding photographs. Martin paid overdue balances on 2 personal credit cards. He repaid money borrowed from an uncle. He settled a collection account tied to his old insurance agency. He moved several $1,000s into a savings account he labeled Family Reserve. "This is not one category of spending," Samuel said, calling all of it wedding debt hides who received the benefit. He built 3 columns: wedding vendors, Ava and Noah's direct benefits, Martin's personal debts and transfers. My $5,000 gift appeared on a separate page because it had never come from the loan. I stared at the numbers until the flowers and photographs stopped feeling like the main story. My father had used Ava's wedding as a moral shield. Any question about the financing became an attack on her happiness. Behind that shield, he had repaired his own balance sheet with my credit. Samuel found another application using the same alias email before we finished the first ledger. It was for a personal line of credit. The application had been declined. Then came the furniture inquiry from my report. That application used the prepaid phone and Martin's address. It listed Ava's planned condominium as the delivery location. A travel credit request had been started under the same identity profile. So had a business credit application connected to an event planning venture Ava had once discussed online. Not every application had reached approval. Some stopped at document requests. One had been abandoned after a verification problem. But the pattern mattered. The wedding loan was not a single desperate decision made under deadline pressure. Martin had created a reusable financial version of me, complete with income, identity documents, an email, a phone, and an address he controlled. The first loan had worked. There was no reason for him to believe he needed to stop. I met Ava and Noah in Aaron's conference room after the furniture application surfaced. Noah looked exhausted. He placed his phone on the table and said, "I knew the wedding was too expensive. I did not know Leah was on the loan." Ava said Martin had told them I had co-signed. Noah turned toward her. "Then show us where she signed." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. Martin had sent them screenshots saying I would stand behind the loan. He had not sent a contract, a disclosure, or a message from me. He had told them the paperwork was handled, and they had accepted that answer because the answer allowed the spending to continue. Noah admitted he had seen my family text refusing to co-sign. "I thought you changed your mind," he said. "Why?" "Because Martin said you did." "Did you ask me?" "No." He did not cry or offer a speech. He said the word no and allowed it to describe his failure. Ava told me she had not known about the Alias email, the prepaid number, or the other applications. I believed her because the records showed Martin controlling the contact channels. I also knew she had accepted a honeymoon, a condominium deposit, and upgrades after the original budget had failed. Not filling out the application did not make every benefit invisible. Noah agreed to preserve their messages and stop any purchases tied to Martin's financing. Ava resisted until I showed her the furniture inquiry date. It had been submitted after the wedding. "This wasn't just about giving you one perfect day," I said. He was planning to keep using my name for whatever came next. Ava looked at the disbursement ledger. Dad said the condo deposit came from his savings. It came from an account funded by the loan. Noah asked Samuel to calculate the amount they had directly received. Ava stared at him as if he had changed sides. He said, "There shouldn't be sides around someone else's identity." That sentence did not make him innocent. It made him the first person in Ava's household willing to ask an obvious question after the obvious answer became inconvenient. At almost the same time, Dana's records team found that several application sessions used the same device fingerprint and home network range. The same pattern later appeared when Martin opened verified notices sent to him as the primary borrower. Dana repeated the limitation before I could turn the result into certainty. The location and device support the timeline. They do not tell us who was physically operating the device at every moment. The failed video verification mattered. The Alias email mattered. The prepaid phone mattered. The old documents mattered. The disbursement to Martin mattered. His messages to Ava mattered. No single fact carried the entire case. The pattern carried it. I completed the identity theft report and expanded my disputes to every unfamiliar inquiry. My credit remained frozen. I postponed the mortgage application indefinitely. Then Martin made what he called a generous offer. He would make every monthly payment on the $82,000 loan. I would withdraw the fraud dispute. We would describe the application as a misunderstanding caused by rushed family paperwork. His proposed agreement stated that I had initially consented to act as joint borrower and later objected after a personal conflict. He wanted to repair the payment history while preserving the lie that created the debt. Erin read the agreement twice. "He is offering repayment," she said, "not correction." If I accepted, the loan would remain on my credit report. My debt-to-income ratio would remain affected. The late payments would remain connected to me, unless separately corrected. The Alias identity would remain unexplained. The other attempts would become easier to dismiss as ordinary family applications. Martin called me after I rejected the proposal. "You'd rather destroy your father than let me pay a bill?" "I'd rather not be listed on a bill I never accepted." "You act like I spent the money on myself." "You did. I paid family debt. You paid your credit cards. I was going to repay everything before you ever noticed." That sentence stayed with me. He did not say before the debt harmed me. He said before I noticed. A week later, I found the hard inquiry alert I had ignored during the wedding preparations. The email had arrived while I was comparing mortgage rates and attending dress fittings. I assumed the alert came from my own early housing research. I opened it, saw a lender name I did not recognize, and told myself I would check later. Later arrived after 2 missed payments. I also discovered that one old family account reused a password I had used elsewhere. My security questions relied on facts Martin knew. I had never confirmed that he deleted my refinance packet. For years, I had moved through his accounts, insurance portals, and tax records as the family administrator. The boundaries around access had become invisible because I was always the person helping. Those were mistakes. They were not consent. I installed a password manager. I replaced every recovery question I could. I kept my credit frozen except when I personally needed access. I created a locked digital archive and a locked physical file for identity records. Martin told relatives I was trying to send him to prison. The calls began on a Sunday afternoon. An aunt said family members should not involve investigators when private repayment was possible. A cousin said Ava had already suffered enough embarrassment. Someone I had not spoken to in 4 years told me that parents made mistakes and children should show grace. The wording was nearly identical in every message. Martin had given them a story in which I agreed informally, changed my mind from jealousy, and weaponized bureaucracy against my own family. I considered sending the application file to all of them. Instead, I wrote one response. I authorized a $5,000 gift. I did not apply for or co-sign the loan. The lender is investigating the use of my identity. I will not discuss private records in a family group chat. Then I muted the conversation. One aunt contacted me privately later that night. Months earlier, Martin had asked whether my salary could be used temporarily to strengthen a family application. She thought he was joking because he said I would never have to make a payment. Her memory did not prove the application. It showed how ordinary the plan had become in Martin's mind. Ava returned to Aaron's office with Noah and a spreadsheet of their own. They had listed the benefits they received from the funded loan, the honeymoon deposit, the condominium reservation, and specific vendor upgrades. They placed the unapproved furniture application on a separate page because it had created an inquiry, but no confirmed purchase. Ava had also marked several funded items she believed were gifts from Martin's savings. Samuel compared her list with the bank trail. Some of those gifts were loan proceeds. Ava leaned back and covered her face. I didn't ask him to use Leah's name. No, I said. You accepted the money after being told my name was involved. And you never asked me. She lowered her hands. What do you want me to do? The old answer would have been to tell her not to worry. I would have separated her intention from the consequence, called Martin the real problem, and created a repayment plan that protected everyone except me. I want the amount you and Noah received documented, I said. I want repayment to go toward the debt. I want no more applications, purchases, or deposits connected to Dad's financing. And I want you to stop saying you thought I agreed, as if that ends the question. Noah nodded before Ava did. They agreed in principle to repay their direct benefits over time. It was not a confession that they completed the application. It was an acknowledgement that they had received value financed through a debt I never accepted. Ava started crying again. This wedding was supposed to prove Dad believed in me. He proved it using my name. She looked at me, and for once, no one rushed in to soften the sentence. Martin accused Ava of betraying him after she shared their messages with Dana. He said he had protected her dream while everyone else calculated what it cost. Ava replied that dreams still needed signatures from the people expected to pay for them. It was the first boundary I had ever heard her state to him. 3 months after I found the account, Dana scheduled a detailed investigative review. The lender's internal records showed that the application began with accurate identity data. A standard video verification step failed. The system then accepted an alternative document process using my old tax return, license image, and bank statement. Confirmation went through the Alias email and prepaid phone. The signature image was uploaded from the same application environment. The account was funded to Martin's bank. My real phone and email never received disclosures. The borrower portal activity matched the application device pattern and did not match the devices or networks I documented during the investigation. Dana did not say the lender had proven who touched every key. She said the records did not support the claim that I personally completed or knowingly participated in the application. That is significant, Aaron said. It is still part of an investigation, not a magic eraser. I asked why the application had passed. Dana answered without defending the process. Correct personal information, valid identity documents, and alternative verification created a file that appeared internally consistent. The contact channels were not yours, but the file did not identify that conflict before funding. True documents had surrounded false consent. The lender now had to decide how the account should be treated, what information had been furnished, and what corrections were supported. The credit reporting companies had their own dispute processes. Each inquiry and attempted account needed separate review. Martin requested a joint conference before Dana finalized the account status recommendation. By then, the townhouse I wanted had been sold. Rachel called to tell me another buyer had closed. My rate lock had expired weeks earlier. She said we could start again after the disputed debt was addressed, but the unit with the kitchen window was gone. I thanked her and sat in my parked car outside the college payroll office. I had not lost the ability to own a home forever. I had lost that home, that rate, and those months. The harm was neither total ruin nor a minor inconvenience. It was a door I had prepared to open, closed by an obligation someone else attached to my name. For one evening, I considered taking Martin's private repayment offer. If he made the late payments current and sold the rental property later, perhaps the conflict would end faster. Ava would stop crying. Relatives would stop calling. I could return to mortgage shopping sooner. Then I read his proposed statement again. I consented initially. The dispute resulted from a misunderstanding. No identity misuse occurred. Even if he paid every dollar on time, the false history would remain. The debt would still be attributed to me. The reusable identity profile would remain unexplained. The family would learn that my consent could be created first and negotiated later. I had spent years accepting repaired consequences instead of requiring harmful conduct to stop. I told Aaron I would attend the conference, but I would not sign a false version of the past. The night before the meeting, Noah sent me a message. "Whatever Martin says tomorrow, we know you never agreed." I saved it with the rest of the file, not because Noah's belief decided anything, but because the truth had finally been spoken inside Ava's household without Martin's permission. Samuel prepared the conference ledger in 3 categories. The first was my authorized $5,000 gift. The second was the value received by Ava and Noah. The third was Martin's personal debts, family repayments, and retained funds. The later attempted applications appeared on a separate timeline because they had not all produced debt. That distinction mattered. We were not going to inflate the case by treating every inquiry as $82,000 more. Martin's attorney proposed one final private solution before the conference began. Martin would sell the rental property and apply the proceeds to the loan if I signed a statement calling the application a misunderstanding. Erin slid the paper back across the table. "Repayment can be negotiated," she said. "False authorization cannot." The formal conference took place in a neutral meeting room near the lender's regional office. Martin arrived in a navy suit he usually wore to funerals and insurance conventions. His attorney sat beside him. Dana joined with the lender file. Samuel brought the disbursement ledger. Ava and Noah waited outside for the portion involving their direct benefits. Martin looked at me as if I had invited strangers into a family argument. Dana began with what the lender had received. The application was created through the Alias email. Verification codes went to the prepaid number. My old income record and license image were submitted. My identity appeared as joint borrower. A signature image was uploaded. The funds went to Martin. No disclosure reached my real email or phone. The borrower portal activity followed the same device pattern used during the application, not the devices and networks I documented as mine during the investigation. A video verification attempt had failed before alternative documents were accepted. Dana explained each item and its limitation. The Alias email did not prove Martin alone controlled it. The home network records did not identify the person at the keyboard. The copied documents did not prove who uploaded them. Then she placed the records together. Martin's attorney said, "Leah gave Martin authority to handle family financial paperwork. They had done this before. I helped with specific documents," I said. "I never authorized him to apply for credit in my name." Martin leaned forward. "You said you would help Ava. I sent $5,000 and wrote that I would not co-sign. You knew the wedding needed more. Knowing someone needs money is not applying to borrow it." He said the typed signature was normal. Dana asked which email delivered the disclosures to me. He said he did not remember. She asked which phone number I used for verification. He said the application platform had selected one. Dana showed the lender's risk flags for the newly associated prepaid number and Alias email, along with the matching application and primary borrower session logs. Martin said he had only handled technical details because I hated paperwork. I was a payroll and benefits manager. The room remained quiet long enough for the claim to collapse under its own weight. Aaron asked whether I had ever told him he could act as my borrower representative. "No," Martin interrupted. "She would have agreed if I had asked properly. She could afford it." Dana looked at him. "Did she agree before the account was opened?" He did not answer directly. He said the vendors were demanding payment. He said Ava's wedding would have been ruined. He said his own credit was stretched because he had helped the family for years. He said Noah could not qualify for enough. He said I had the best salary and the cleanest credit. Then he said the sentence that completed the evidence more clearly than any dramatic confession could have. I thought once it was paid for, she would stop objecting. He believed my consent was an obstacle that would disappear after the money became irreversible. Ava and Noah joined the meeting for the disbursement portion. Samuel showed where the proceeds went. Martin objected to the categories, saying every expense supported the family. I asked him the question that had been waiting since Rachel turned her screen away from me. If I deserved nothing, why did the entire loan depend on pretending I had agreed to everything? Martin looked toward Ava. She did not rescue him. His attorney said the question was emotional. It is also financial, Samuel replied. The underwriting relied on Leah's income and credit profile. Martin's debt load reduced the amount available without her. Ava's income was inconsistent. Noah could not qualify for the full balance. Martin admitted that my profile made the loan possible. He insisted he planned to repay it before I applied for anything important. My home was important, I said. He looked down at the ledger. Dana clarified that the lender's conference was not a criminal hearing, and she was not assigning guilt. The lender would complete its fraud determination, review my borrower status, and correct furnished information as supported by the findings. The credit reporting companies would process the disputes using their own procedures. I refused to withdraw truthful reports. I refused to call the application consensual. I also refused to pretend my $5,000 gift had never existed. The resolution did not happen that afternoon. It happened through letters, document requests, updated findings, and several rounds of disputes. The lender concluded that the available records did not support treating me as an authorized joint borrower. It revised the account information and sent corrections to the reporting companies to which it had furnished the debt. I followed up until the account status and address information were corrected on my reports. The changes did not restore every score point overnight. The hard inquiries required separate review. My mortgage timeline did not reverse. The townhouse did not return to the market. But the $82,000 obligation stopped being treated as a debt I knowingly accepted. Martin remained responsible for the proceeds placed in his account. He sold the rental property and used the net funds to reduce the balance. Ava and Noah signed a repayment agreement covering the honeymoon deposit, condominium reservation, and vendor upgrades they had directly received. Their condominium purchase was postponed. Their repayment was slower than I would have preferred. It was still documented under their names, rather than hidden beneath mine. The later applications were closed, declined, or disputed individually. We did not call every inquiry proof of a completed crime. We made sure none of them quietly matured into another obligation. Martin lost access to my financial documents, accounts, and credit profile. I stopped reviewing his insurance renewals, tax notices, and bank statements. When a relative called about one of his billing problems, I gave them the number for his agent. Family contact became scheduled and limited. Rachel called after the corrected account status reached the reports used by her mortgage company. She did not tell me my credit was magically restored or that approval was guaranteed. She said the disputed obligation no longer appeared in the form that had stopped the first application, and she could review my current income, savings, rate, and remaining debts again. The housing market had changed while the investigation moved through its separate systems. Rates were different. The down payment I had saved still mattered, but the monthly numbers were not the ones we discussed at our first meeting. I had to decide whether getting a home quickly was worth accepting a payment that made me uncomfortable. For most of my life, urgency had been the language Martin used to erase questions. The roof would leak if I did not transfer money that day. Ava would lose her venue if I did not help that week. A family problem would become a public embarrassment if I did not solve it before anyone noticed. I told Rachel I wanted a payment I could carry without depending on future raises, gifts, or family reimbursements. We looked at smaller properties and different neighborhoods. I walked away from 2 units when the association budgets were weak, and one when the inspection showed repairs the seller kept minimizing. Each no delayed me. None of them felt like failure. The account correction had restored more than a number. It had restored my right to examine an obligation before it became mine. Ava and I did not return to normal because normal had included her assuming I would absorb whatever protected her feelings. We spoke carefully. Sometimes we went weeks without contact. She continued making payments and stopped asking me to describe Martin's actions more gently. 9 months after Rachel first showed me the loan, I sat at another closing table. The townhouse was not the one I had originally wanted. This one was across town, with 2 bedrooms, a small study, and a back step barely large enough for 2 chairs. The kitchen window faced a row of maple trees instead of a courtyard. I had read every page of the mortgage package twice. My credit files had been temporarily lifted only for the application. My password manager held unique credentials. Sensitive documents stayed in a locked cabinet. No family email served as a recovery account. No one else held copies of my identity documents for convenience. The closing officer asked me to confirm that no other person had authority to obtain credit in my name. No one, I said. The word felt larger than the room. I signed a debt I understood, for a home I had chosen, under terms I had reviewed. A week after I moved in, Martin texted me a photograph of an insurance renewal notice. "Can you check this?" "The agent is probably overcharging me," I answered. "Send it to your agent. I don't manage family finances anymore." He replied that I was still punishing him. I did not explain the difference between punishment and lost access. He had spent years benefiting from my explanations without respecting my answers. I placed the phone face down and carried the last box into the study. Inside were my credit reports, dispute letters, closing papers, and the photograph from Ava's wedding that had once sat on my desk. I kept the picture, not because I had forgotten what paid for the flowers, but because Martin no longer decided which memories I was required to erase. I locked the file cabinet and put the key on my own ring. Then I opened the front door to the first home I had ever financed through obligations that were mine because I had knowingly accepted them.